You should thank me for still giving you a little dignity. He leaned back, laughing as he signed the divorce papers, convinced she had already lost. She stayed silent, steady, while he bragged about the prenuptial agreement he believed would strip her of everything. But when the judge opened the original file, the room shifted. His face drained as the truth surfaced. The agreement was built on lies. What do you think she should do next? Comment where you're watching from and subscribe to support the channel. The courtroom felt heavy as the hearing began, its quiet air filled with the tension of people waiting for a verdict none of them fully understood yet. Iluna Merrick sat at the petitioner's table, her posture composed but her hands tight around a small notebook resting on her lap. She tried to steady her breathing, although every movement from the man across the room made her chest tighten. Quentin Loxley reclined in his chair with an air of complete certainty, tapping a polished pen against the documents in front of him as if the entire proceeding were only a formality he had already won. Rowan Hale, Iluna's attorney, sat beside her. He was a calm, observant man with a low voice and a habit of taking notes even when no one else saw the need. It was his first official appearance with her, yet he offered a quiet steadiness that made her feel less adrift. On the other side, Quentin's lawyer, Belton Morris, adjusted his tie and smirked as if the outcome had already been written in Quentin's favor. The judge entered, and everyone rose. Once they were seated again, Belton began reading the divorce terms with a confidence that bordered on arrogance. He emphasized every clause that protected Quentin, describing how the prenuptial agreement secured all major assets under Quentin's name. Quentin looked pleased, almost entertained. He glanced at Iluna as if expecting her to fold under the weight of his words. She did not. She kept her eyes forward, though her fingers trembled slightly on the notebook. She thought about the years she had spent building the company with him, the nights when she believed they were equals, and the mornings when she still hoped he saw her as more than a support beam holding up his image. That hope had died long before this day, yet facing its final burial left her cold. Quentin leaned closer to Belton and whispered something that made them both laugh softly. Belton continued with a louder tone, saying the agreement reflected that Iluna had never been responsible for strategic decisions and had only offered domestic support within the business environment. The phrasing stung more than the content. It was the dismissal in his voice, the ease with which he shrank her down to nothing. Rowan raised a hand. Your Honor, I request that the clerk record counsel's wording precisely. My client disputes the characterization of her role. The judge nodded, watching Rowan with brief curiosity before returning to the thick file open in front of him. He turned a few pages, paused for a moment, and made a note. Iluna could not tell whether it was a good sign or a warning that the worst was still ahead. Quentin signed a preliminary page with a theatrical flourish. Looks like today is the day you get to start over, Iluna, he said loudly enough for the room to hear. I hope you find something that suits you. His tone was light, but his eyes carried the same superiority she had endured for years. She kept her gaze on her hands and whispered something into Rowan's ear. The lawyer gave the faintest nod, almost unnoticeable, then closed his notebook and waited. The judge lifted the original prenuptial document and flipped through it with growing focus. He tapped the margin with his pen, pushed his glasses higher on his nose, and turned another page without speaking. The silence stretched until even Quentin stopped smiling. Finally, the judge looked up at Iluna. Mrs. Merrick, he asked, his voice firm and direct, did you have independent legal counsel when you signed this agreement? Every sound in the room vanished. Quentin stiffened. Belton turned sharply toward his client. Iluna felt her heartbeat quicken, but her face remained steady as she prepared to answer. Iluna did not answer the judge right away. Her breath caught in her chest and the courtroom around her began to fade as her mind pulled her backward into the memory that had pushed her onto this path. The judge's question echoed in her thoughts, yet what rose to the surface first was the night everything began to break. 3 months earlier, the company she had built with Quentin celebrated a major achievement. The event had been planned for weeks, and although her name appeared on the official invitation as a co-founder, she knew very well that the spotlight would belong entirely to him. She arrived beside Quentin, dressed carefully to match the importance of the occasion, but he gave her only a brief glance as they entered. Before the ceremony started, Quentin leaned close, his expression perfectly polite for the cameras nearby. Stay with the guests tonight. he said softly. A single figure on the stage keeps the story clean. It is good for the shareholders. His voice carried a tone that sounded like a request, but Aluna felt the firm pressure of expectation beneath every word. She swallowed her disappointment and nodded, even though something inside her tightened. When the host invited Quentin to the microphone, the entire room erupted in applause. Aluna watched him straighten his suit, smile confidently, and begin describing the company's early struggles and triumphs. She listened for her name, not out of vanity, but because she remembered every night they spent working, every deal she secured, and every risk she helped calculate. It never came. He told the story as if he had stood alone. The crowd laughed when he joked that she was always too nervous to manage numbers, and that she preferred arranging flowers to reviewing financial reports. The comments were meant to sound light, but they carried the same dismissive tone she had heard so many times behind closed doors. She forced herself to smile, although her hands trembled slightly as she held her glass. A moment later, a prominent investor raised his hand and asked about ownership within the company. Quentin responded without hesitation. "Everything is structured clearly through our prenuptial agreement," he announced with pride. "There will never be confusion about where the leadership and the assets belong." His words drew murmurs of approval from those who admired his confidence. Aluna felt a cold wave run through her chest. She had known about the agreement, but hearing him speak of it so boldly, almost triumphantly, made her feel exposed in front of strangers. She wondered how many people in that room believed she had contributed nothing. After the event ended, she stepped away from the guests and tried to gather her thoughts. As she approached a hallway near the back, she heard Quentin speaking with his assistant, a young man named Foster who had joined the company a year earlier. Foster admired Quentin openly and often tried to imitate his manner of speaking. "If she becomes difficult," Quentin said, "I will let the agreement do the work. She cannot take anything. It is all locked in." Foster chuckled. "Will she fight you?" "She can try," Quentin replied, "but she does not have the understanding or the leverage. She never has." Aluna stood still, unable to move until their voices faded. She pressed her hand to her chest and felt an ache that was deeper than anger. It was the realization that the man she had trusted did not see her as a partner. He saw her as an accessory he could remove whenever convenient. Hours later at home, she opened the drawer where she kept her wedding ring when she felt overwhelmed. Beneath it lay the copy of the prenuptial agreement, folded neatly as if it had never held any danger. She unfolded it slowly and stared at the dense paragraphs. She remembered signing it while grieving a personal loss, barely listening to Quentin's explanation that it was a routine document. She realized she had never truly read it. She placed it on the table, took a deep breath, and felt something shift inside her. It was not rage. It was clarity. She understood that if she did nothing, he would erase her from the story she helped build. Her fingers touched the paper once more as she made a silent promise to herself. She would not let him decide who she was. Aluna woke the next morning with the weight of the previous night still pressing on her chest. The prenuptial agreement remained on the table where she had left it, its pages spread open like a quiet accusation. She sat down slowly, rubbed her temples, and forced herself to read each line. The legal terms felt dense and deliberately confusing, filled with clauses that placed every advantage in Quentin's hands. The more she studied it, the clearer one truth became. She had never understood what she had signed. A tremor of frustration mixed with shame moved through her. She had entered that marriage during one of the most vulnerable periods of her life, grieving the loss of a close relative and clinging to the comfort Quentin offered. Now she saw how easily that comfort had masked pressure. She wondered if he had counted on her emotional fog, hoping she would not question anything. She needed help. She needed someone who would tell her the truth without fear or favoritism. That thought led her to Maya Collins, an old friend from university. Maya worked in the legal department of a large company and had always been sharply intuitive, the kind of person who could read a document once and uncover everything that was wrong with it. When Aluna arrived at Maya's apartment later that day, Maya opened the door with a concerned expression. "You sounded tense on the phone," she said while guiding Aluna inside. "Tell me what happened." Aluna handed her the agreement and tried to explain everything without letting her emotions spill over. Maya listened with growing alarm as she flipped through the pages. She sat down at the dining table, pushed her glasses higher, and read more carefully. Aluna, she said in a steady voice, this document is extremely one-sided. It protects Quentin in every aspect and leaves you with nothing. Something is wrong with how this was signed. Were you given a lawyer at the time? No, Aluna replied quietly. He said it was a simple formality. I trusted him. Maya exhaled slowly. Then this is not as solid as he believes. For an agreement like this to hold weight, you should have had independent counsel. At the very least, there should be written proof that you declined that right. Do you have anything like that? Aluna shook her head. I do not think so. Maya tapped her finger on the edge of the document. You need to start writing everything you remember, every detail about the day you signed this, every moment when he used it to control you, and every conversation that made you feel pressured. Memory fades fast, so put it down before you lose anything important. Aluna felt a nervous flutter in her stomach. Will it matter? It might matter more than you think, Maya replied. If there is proof that Quentin pushed you into signing while you were emotionally compromised, then this agreement could be challenged. You need a divorce lawyer who knows how to fight these cases. Maya handed her a small notebook. Start now. Write it all. Do not leave anything out. Aluna took the notebook, grateful and frightened at the same time. She sat on the couch and began writing. Each memory she put on the page felt sharper, more painful, but also clearer. She wrote about the day she signed the document, about the grief she had been drowning in, and the way Quentin had rushed her through every signature. She wrote about the comments he made during arguments, reminding her that she owned nothing and that the company was his alone. Hours passed without her noticing. When she finally looked up, Maya stood beside her with a solemn look. There is another thing, Maya said gently. You need a lawyer who will not hesitate to confront him. I know someone. His name is Rowan Hale. He is demanding, but he is fair, and he does not let intimidation get in the way of justice. You should meet him. Aluna closed the notebook and held it close to her chest. She knew that speaking to an attorney meant stepping into a fight she had avoided for years. The idea frightened her, but it also awakened something steady inside her. She had spent too long letting others define her. She would not continue doing that. She looked at Maya with a quiet determination. Give me his number. Maya smiled, sensing the shift in her. I knew you would say that. Aluna arrived at Rowan Hale's office the next afternoon, with the notebook pressed tightly against her chest. She had imagined a large, intimidating space filled with trophies and certificates, but the office was modest, almost plain. A few framed documents hung on the wall, and a single plant sat near the window, its leaves slightly tilted toward the light. Rowan stood when she entered, offering a polite nod rather than the grand greeting she expected. He was a man in his early 50s with calm eyes and a measured presence. His dark hair was touched with gray at the temples, and he carried himself with quiet confidence. Mrs. Merrick, he said as he gestured toward the chair opposite his desk, please sit. Maya told me you have concerns about a prenuptial agreement. Aluna sat slowly, feeling the weight of her own uncertainty. Thank you for meeting me, she replied, her voice softer than she intended. I do not know where to start. Start with the truth, Rowan said. His tone was not unkind, but it was firm. Tell me what you believe happened, not what you think sounds reasonable. She opened the notebook and glanced at the words she had written. I signed the agreement during a difficult time. I did not understand it, and Quentin did not encourage me to get a lawyer. He told me it was only paperwork. I trusted him. Rowan leaned back in his chair, observing her carefully. Did he explain any part of the document? No, she answered. He rushed me through it. I felt overwhelmed. I was grieving a loss in my family. Rowan wrote a brief note. And since then, has he used the agreement to assert control in the relationship? Aluna hesitated, then nodded. Yes. During arguments, he reminded me that I had no claim over the company. He said everything was protected. He made it sound like I should be grateful to stay by his side. Rowan tapped his pen lightly on the desk. You need to understand something important. A prenuptial agreement is only valid when both parties understand the terms and have the opportunity to seek independent counsel. If you were pressured emotionally or denied the chance to consult your own lawyer, the agreement may not stand. His explanation brought a slow rise of hope inside her, although she feared the consequences that came with hope. Are you saying it can be challenged? It can be examined, Rowan corrected. Whether it can be overturned will depend on evidence and testimony. We need clarity, not assumptions. Aluna lowered her gaze to her notebook. The memories she had written remained raw, but they formed a path she could finally follow. I want to move forward, she said quietly. I want the truth in front of him and in front of the court. I do not want to be erased. Rowan studied her for a long moment. Then you must understand what it means to challenge him. Divorce cases involving powerful spouses often get messy. He may try to intimidate you. He may try to expose personal details you would rather protect. Are you prepared for that? Fear flickered through her, but she remembered the conversation she had overheard between Quentin and his assistant, the way he spoke about removing her without hesitation. She remembered the way he looked at her during the celebration night, as if she were a decorative piece rather than a partner. Yes, she said, I am prepared. Rowan nodded with approval. Good. We will build steady ground before we confront anything. First, we gather all evidence. Emails, notes, financial records, and accounts of any moment where the agreement was used against you. He pointed to the notebook. What you have written will help. It shows a pattern. Aluna felt a small surge of strength. What happens next? I will review the agreement closely, Rowan said. Then we will work quietly. Quentin must not know we are preparing a challenge. If he believes the agreement is safe, he will lower his guard. That will give us time to gather everything we need. Something shifted inside her, a reassurance she had not felt in years. She sat straighter and closed the notebook gently. Thank you, she said. Rowan offered a rare, faint smile. You are not alone in this, Mrs. Merrick. You stepped through my door, and that is the first act of standing up for yourself. As she rose to leave, her steps felt steadier. The fight ahead frightened her, but she finally had direction. She finally had someone willing to guide her, not because she belonged to him, but because she deserved justice. Quentin noticed the change in Aluna before anyone else did, although he misunderstood it completely. He saw her quieter expression, her deliberate movements, and the way she no longer rushed to answer his messages. In his mind, that meant she had accepted her fate. He believed she had finally realized she could not win against him. One morning, he called Foster, his young assistant, into his office. Foster admired Quentin and treated every task as a chance to prove himself. It is time to move ahead with the restructuring, Quentin said while tapping his pen on a stack of documents. Reduce Aluna's position to a ceremonial advisory role. Make sure the paperwork shows she has no decision-making authority. Foster hesitated, but she helped create several divisions of the company. People still go to her for approval. Quentin lifted an eyebrow. They will learn to stop. Change the records. I want her listed as a consultant without responsibility. Foster nodded quickly, eager to please. I will handle it. As Quentin worked to erase her presence within the company, Aluna sat with Rowan in his office, reviewing the steps they needed to take. She had brought new information that a junior accountant named Clara had secretly passed along. Clara was a quiet, careful woman in her late 20s who had once faced pressure from a supervisor to manipulate numbers. Aluna had protected her at the time, and Clara had not forgotten. Clara had overheard conversations about changes in Aluna's role and sent copies of internal memos to her personal email with a short message. I know what he is doing. You once stood up for me, so I am standing up for you. The message had made Aluna's chest tighten with gratitude. Rowan reviewed the memos and nodded with approval. This helps us show a pattern of control before the divorce. It supports your claim that the agreement was used to threaten you. Aluna felt the familiar ache of fear while watching Rowan highlight sections of the documents. He is going to retaliate, she said quietly. He never handles resistance well. Rowan closed the folder gently. You knew this would happen. The question is whether you are ready. Before she could answer, her phone buzzed. It was an email from Quentin. The subject line read, Confidential Agreement for Mutual Benefit. She opened it and saw a draft settlement that offered her a small sum of money on the condition that she accepted the prenuptial agreement fully and promised silence about the company. Her hands shook slightly as she scrolled through it. Every line felt like an insult wrapped in polite language. Quentin believed he could buy her compliance, as if she had no pride or identity of her own. She turned the phone toward Rowan. He wants to end everything quietly, she said. Rowan read the email with a steady expression. This is a test. He wants to see if you will fold. If you accept this, you lose your leverage forever. Iluna stared at the screen. Years of being overshadowed, dismissed, and controlled pressed against her mind. She thought about the night she had heard him telling Foster that everything was locked in his favor. She thought about the celebration speech where he erased her contributions. Anger rose inside her, but beneath it was something more powerful. It was dignity. She closed the email and placed the phone on the table. I will not accept this. Rowan nodded, satisfied. Then we moved forward. That evening, alone in her room, Iluna put the offer letter beside her notebook. She opened the notebook and flipped through the pages she had written. Each memory, each detail of manipulation, each moment of doubt formed a map of everything she had endured. She looked at her reflection in the mirror. Her eyes were tired, but there was clarity in them. She tore the printed agreement in half. The sound of the paper ripping felt like a door closing behind her. She whispered to herself, I am done letting him decide who I am. It was the first time she had spoken the words out loud, and they filled the room with a calm she had not felt in years. The courtroom opened to a low murmur of voices as people settled into their seats. Quentin entered first with confident strides, followed closely by Belton Morris, who looked eager to perform. Quentin's expression carried the same certainty he had shown from the beginning, the certainty of a man convinced he held every advantage. He adjusted his cuffs and scanned the room as if preparing to receive praise rather than judgment. Iluna walked in moments later with Rowan Hale by her side. Her steps were calm and deliberate, and although her heart pounded beneath her blouse, she kept her posture steady. She felt Rowan's presence like an anchor, grounding her through the storm she knew was coming. Several pairs of eyes turned toward her, some curious, some doubtful, but she ignored them and focused on the front of the room. When the judge entered, silence settled immediately. Everyone rose, then sat again as the session began. Belton stood first with several folders. Your Honor, he said with practiced certainty, we present the prenuptial agreement clearly outlining asset separation. Mrs. Merrick signed it freely without objection or confusion. The document reflects her understanding that the company belongs solely to Mr. Locksley. Quentin nodded with satisfaction and leaned back. His voice carried across the courtroom. There has never been a misunderstanding. Iluna agreed to these terms before we married. Rowan waited until Belton finished before rising slowly. Your Honor, we request clarification on the signing process of this agreement, specifically whether Mrs. Merrick was informed of her right to independent counsel. Belton scoffed softly. She did not need one. She trusted my client. That should speak for itself. Rowan turned to Quentin. Mr. Locksley, did you tell your wife she had the option to consult her own lawyer? Quentin's confidence did not flicker. She did not ask for one. She said it was fine. Rowan faced the judge. We have reason to believe the circumstances of the signing were not as voluntary or clear as the opposing counsel claims. Therefore, we request the court review additional evidence. He opened a folder and laid out printed emails between Quentin and Belton. The judge adjusted his glasses and read through the first pages. Belton's face tightened slightly as the document changed the tone of the room. Rowan spoke with calm precision. These emails show Mr. Locksley discussing how to expedite the signing while Mrs. Merrick was under emotional distress. They indicate an awareness that she did not fully understand the terms. Phrases such as her being too overwhelmed to question the document and the suggestion that she would not comprehend legal terminology are repeated. Iluna watched Quentin's jaw tense. The confidence in his posture shifted, if only slightly. For the first time, he did not look entirely certain. The judge looked from Quentin to the papers before him. Mrs. Merrick, he said, directing his gaze to her, tell the court about the day you signed this agreement. Iluna felt every eye in the room turn toward her. She drew in a slow breath and let her voice remain steady. I had lost someone close to me. I was grieving. Quentin told me it was a simple formality, something that would not affect our life. I trusted his words. I was not encouraged to seek my own lawyer. I did not understand the language in the document. Rowan then presented the notebook entries and a written summary from Maya Collins confirming Iluna's emotional state during the signing and the lack of independent guidance. The judge reviewed everything carefully. A long silence followed. Finally, he closed the folder. Based on the evidence presented, there is no documentation showing Mrs. Merrick was advised of her right to independent counsel, nor any proof that she knowingly waived that right. The court rules that this prenuptial agreement is invalid. Quentin froze. Belton lowered his gaze, unable to hide the shock that crossed his features. The judge continued, his tone firm. Furthermore, due to indications of coercive behavior and potential misrepresentation, a portion of this case will be forwarded for further investigation. A wave of whispers filled the room. Quentin turned to Aluna, his eyes wide with disbelief. She met his gaze without anger or triumph. She simply acknowledged the moment with a quiet nod, a confirmation that she no longer lived under the shadows he created. The courtroom had shifted, and for the first time, she felt the balance of power return to her hands. The news of the court's ruling spread through the company faster than any official message could. By the next morning, the leadership floor was filled with whispered conversations and tense glances. Many employees avoided eye contact with Quentin, while others watched him with open suspicion. His confident stride had vanished, replaced by hurried steps and a stiffness that revealed his unease. Aluna arrived later in the day with Rowan. She did not walk with pride or celebration. She moved with a quiet resolve, aware that every pair of eyes carried a different judgment. Some looked at her with respect, others with resentment, and a few with confusion. She breathed deeply and reminded herself why she had fought for this moment. It was not about humiliating someone. It was about recovering what had been taken from her. During a brief meeting with the board, the atmosphere felt strained. Several members who once praised Quentin now questioned him bluntly. One of them, a senior advisor named Carson Reed, leaned forward with an expression of clear concern. Carson had been one of the earliest supporters of the company. Aluna had met him briefly in the past, although they had never worked closely. "Mr. Loxley," Carson said, "we need to understand how this happened. The investors trusted your leadership. This situation raises questions about transparency and risk management." Quentin forced a composed smile. "I understand the concern. I assure everyone that the company remains stable." Carson shifted his gaze to Aluna. "Mrs. Merrick, the board acknowledges that many of our assumptions were incorrect. We also recognize your contributions. You will need to decide how involved you wish to be moving forward." Aluna felt a knot tighten in her chest. The weight of the decision lingered between responsibility and freedom. She thought about the employees who still had faith in her, including the quiet accountant who had secretly warned her about Quentin's plans. She remembered the young assistant who had once been blamed for a mistake she did not make. People like them deserve better leadership. After the meeting, Aluna stepped outside the boardroom and found Evelyn Clark waiting for her. Evelyn was a mid-level manager who had joined the company 2 years earlier. Aluna had helped her handle an unfair performance review during a difficult time. Evelyn's face carried worry now. "Aluna," she said, her voice low, "some departments are scared. They think the company might fall apart. There is talk about layoffs. People are nervous." Aluna nodded. "I understand. Tell everyone to stay calm for now. Nothing has been decided." Evelyn hesitated. "Will you stay? People trust you more than you realize." Before Aluna could answer, she heard footsteps approaching. Quentin stood a few feet away, his expression worn and restless. He waited until Evelyn stepped aside. "Aluna, can we talk?" he asked quietly. She followed him into a private office. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Quentin looked nothing like the man who had boasted in the courtroom. His hands trembled slightly as he clasped them together. "I know I made mistakes," he said. "I handled things poorly. I was trying to protect what I built, and I pushed too hard." His voice wavered. "I do not want the company to collapse. I do not want the investigation to destroy everything. Can we find an agreement that does not ruin both of us?" Aluna listened without interrupting. She felt the familiar ache of betrayal rise in her chest. She remembered every moment he had dismissed her, every time he used the contract to silence her, every careless joke at her expense. "Quentin," she said, "you were not protecting anything. You were protecting yourself. You erased me from the company and expected me to accept it." He looked down at the floor. "I know. I cannot change the past. I just want a chance to fix what I can." She shook her head slowly. "You will answer for your choices. That is your responsibility, not mine. I will not hide the truth for you. His shoulders sagged, and his silence gave her the final clarity she needed. She left the office with her decision firm in her mind. She would stay and rebuild the company from within, not to defeat Quentin, but to protect what she had created and to make sure no one else would be erased the way she had been. The first weeks after the ruling felt like a long breath that Aluna had held for years finally beginning to release. She walked through the office with a steady rhythm, aware that every change she made carried weight. Her decision to stay had surprised several board members, but the reaction among employees was different. Some greeted her with relief, some with curiosity, and some with hope they tried to hide behind polite smiles. Her first meeting as an official co-founder drew a full room. Carson Reed reviewed documents at the far end of the table, while Evelyn Clark sat near the center, prepared to speak if needed. Rowan was there as well, invited for legal guidance as the company reorganized its leadership roles. Aluna cleared her throat. Thank you for coming. We will not rebuild the company by repeating the old mistakes. We will establish new procedures to protect everyone in this room and everyone who chooses to work with us. Carson nodded thoughtfully. What changes do you propose? She passed out a short document. Every contract must be explained clearly. No one should ever be pressured into signing anything they do not understand. This includes employees, partners, and clients. She paused. I know what it feels like to be pushed into decisions when you are vulnerable. That will not happen here again. Evelyn raised her hand slightly. People will appreciate this. Many felt they never had a voice. Aluna offered a small smile in return. They will have one now. After the meeting ended, she returned to her office and found a message waiting for her. Quentin had been officially notified that he would lose all executive authority and would face additional penalties through a mandatory restitution and education program. It was not a prison sentence, but it was a clear acknowledgement that his actions carried consequences. She read the notice slowly, absorbing the reality that the chapter of their shared leadership was closed. A quiet ache filled her chest. Her pain was still real, but it no longer controlled her steps. Later that afternoon, Aluna gathered the staff for an announcement. The room filled quickly with faces she had known for years and others who had joined more recently. She held a small notebook in her hand, the same one she had used to record everything during the months before the trial. I want to introduce a new initiative, she said. It is called Loon Rise. It will offer financial education, basic legal guidance, and personal support to anyone who feels they have been pressured or mistreated in personal or professional agreements. This will be open to our staff and to the public. A murmur of interest moved through the room. She saw recognition in some faces, especially the younger employees. They understood the value of what she was offering. A young designer named Alicia, who had joined only a few months earlier, raised her hand. Why did you decide to create this? Aluna met her gaze. Because many of us stay silent out of fear. Fear of losing our jobs, fear of losing someone we care about, or fear of being dismissed. Her voice softened. I stayed silent too long. I want people to have the information and confidence I did not have when I needed it most. Alicia nodded slowly. The sincerity in her eyes told Aluna she had reached someone. As the group dispersed, Evelyn approached with a warm expression. You are changing things more than you realize. Aluna exhaled quietly. I hope it lasts. In the evening, she stepped outside to clear her mind. The air was cool and the sky had a soft glow that reminded her of the nights she once spent wondering who she could become. She held her notebook close for a moment before making a final decision. She walked to the small library space the company kept for creative work and placed the notebook on a shelf. Her notes remained inside, filled with painful memories and hard truths. Yet she no longer needed to hide them. She left it there as a reminder for anyone who might need courage. As she walked away, her steps felt lighter. She knew her journey was not finished, but she also knew she had reclaimed her voice. The company, her work, and her identity were hers again, shaped by her choices and strengthened by her resilience. She was no longer the woman waiting behind someone else's shadow. She was the one leading others out of it. Thank you so much for listening to Aluna Merrick's story. Her journey of pain, courage, and reclaiming her worth reminds us that no one should ever stay silent about their value. I would love to hear your thoughts about everything she went through, so feel free to share your feelings and opinions in the comments. If this story touched you or made you reflect on something in your own life, please support the channel by liking the video and subscribing. Your encouragement helps me bring more meaningful stories to you.